Injuries are a part of football, which means they are a part of fantasy football. And sometimes it just feels like my team is so banged up. That's also true in life. Oftentimes, injuries become a huge part of the season that we're in and the suffering and the pain that we're going through. So, how do we handle it in fantasy? And more importantly, how do we handle the injuries of life? Let's unpack it. This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast, and we are live as we unpack fantasy, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson with Trip Smith. He's a pastor at Hope Community Church. Our producer is Aaron Bennett. And we are your fantasy coaches, here to encourage you and help you win while you play fantasy football with purpose. As we provide fantasy advice, we won't always be right, but we hope we'll be convincing. And we are coming to you live from the Unpacking It Ministry studio here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we are ready to talk Week 10 in the NFL. We'll put an emphasis today on injuries. That is this week's Breakout. Each week on this show, we take a fantasy concept related to life, related to the Bible. And so today we will do that with injuries. Be sure to check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Hopefully you are already a member. You can become one for free, gain access to the weekly breakouts. We've got additional content on the breakout page that is designed for you as well as your league to go through the content each week, discuss the questions that are provided, the challenge, and there's a little did you know, some NFL trivia. So it's a lot of fun, and I know I'm having a blast with my two leagues that I meet with every week. Some really great conversations every week. And so I hope that you're experiencing that as well. And if you've missed kind of this season, hey, start planning for next season. So fantasyfootballfellowship.com. All right, so we'll do all of our favorite segments today on the show. We'll do some bandwagon riding. We'll ask, who is that? There was a tight end, big tight end the other night, had a big game. We'll see if we know who he is. And then we'll do some accountability and confession. Is it time for me to finally confess that I was wrong since July about a running back in LA? We'll see. We'll see. It's week 10. Am I already jumping off the bandwagon? I will confess that in just a little bit. Potentially, we will see. And then we'll talk waiver wire and peace or panic as well. But we begin with the shenanigans. And once again, we had plenty. Fantasy. All right, so if we're going to talk shenanigans, let's go all the way back to Thursday night because it kicked off kind of just an intriguing Week 10 in the NFL where we saw some big performances. But that Ravens-Bengals game was outrageous. And for us as fantasy managers, depending on what side you were on with that game, you either started your fantasy weekend feeling like, I got this, or, all right, well, my matchup is done. And so I texted my buddy who had Lamar Jackson, and I said, congratulations, it's Thursday night, and you've already won. And sure enough, he did. So that was tough. That was tough on me. But Trip, how you doing? How'd you survive the shenanigans of Bengals-Ravens?
I think survive would be a generous word. I think I played Jamar Chase in so many leagues, you would not believe it. And so as a rule, I try when I get up on Friday morning, I try not to look at my phone right away, have a little bit of time, just being quiet, being in the house by myself, maybe reading the Bible a little bit. Don't look at fantasy until later in the morning. And then I pulled it open, man. And I mean, I was just playing Jamar Chase everywhere. And what was it? 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, an all-time great performance, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 points, depending on your scoring format. And in that moment, the thought process I went through was, I give up. I'm not winning. I'm not winning this week. And then I said, no, don't do that. There's a chance that you can get back into it. And in one of those 4 matchups, I did manage to actually win the game, to come back and beat the Jamar Chase team without any of those other stud performers, which felt really good. I got close in another one. But yeah, Jamar kind of, he ruined my fantasy weekend before it even began. So I just trying to stay positive and keep putting the players in and try to win. And it didn't really work out for me. But.
Man, so I played Lamar in 2 leagues and lost both of those leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So that was unfortunate.
I don't think I was playing him anywhere. So nice offset the Jamar with no Lamar. So that's
that. Yeah. So that was unfortunate. But I did have Joe Burrow. And he got me the win. So I'm thankful for that. I'm curious to see what happens with the Bengals moving forward, because they're this weird team where the offense is so good. They're slowly but surely getting out of, they've been out of playoff contention. There's been hope alive because there's plenty of time left in the season. Well, that time is dwindling. Their window of opportunity to make a run is starting to close. And so do they continue to play with that sense of urgency? Is Burrow still out there as the season winds down? Because they're not, it's unlikely they're going to catch the Ravens or the Steelers. Those two teams are, they're the teams to beat. So how does that affect fantasy? That's what I'm, always concerned about. I want players on my fantasy roster in meaningful games down the stretch. And again, sometimes those meaningful games are young players like Tyrone Tracy playing tough for the Giants. So that may be a case down the stretch for a team like that. But the Bengals are one of those iffy teams.
Yeah, I don't think Joe Burrow has it in him to just give up no matter what happens, So They basically have to win out to have a chance kind of to get into it. So I think, if they lose a couple more games, what's going to happen with the motivation for guys like T. Higgins to get back on the field, for some of these secondary players on the Bengals. So, that's a great point, man. You want teams that are in it towards the end.
And then we also have to be concerned if the Chiefs keep winning, do they rest their guys the final 2 weeks? So that's another thing to consider.
I mean, is that already happening? Right. I mean, I feel like they're already on a trajectory to at least be able to rest that last week and maybe multiple weeks. How do they keep winning? They just keep winning. I was sitting there watching and I was like, I'm telling my wife, who doesn't care at all, but she's in the room because Taylor Swift is in Arrowhead Stadium somewhere. And hey, pay attention. This is incredible. The Broncos are about to beat the Chiefs. Nobody thought that this was going to happen. And then, it was like their whole defensive line busted through the Broncos. It was like 4 guys who had a chance to block that field goal. It's just like, how do they keep doing it? And
find a way.
They're going to be resting their players at the end of the season. And I don't know if that's actionable advice, but you got to think about that if you're kind of trying to contend in that week 17 championship matchup.
It's concerning. Now, the one positive, Isaiah Pacheco's coming back. Maybe toward the end of the season, they're trying to get him some reps, trying to get him back into the mix. So maybe he plays a little bit more down the stretch. So if you do have him and you've been storing him on IR like I have, waiting for him to return, that'll be nice. All right, a couple other things from the shenanigans standpoint. How about Monday Night Football? So not out of nowhere, but the Dolphins finally pull it out, get the win. The Rams were the hot team. They settle for field goals. The Dolphins get the win. And I got to say, I went into Monday night needing Tyreek Hill to stink, and he stunk enough for me to get 2 wins against him. So I was thankful for that. I was in a crazy matchup where they had Kyron Williams, Puka, and Tyreek Hill, and they did not do enough.
Wow.
I hung on.
That's
so
awesome.
that was fun. So I was thankful for that. But now with the Dolphins, with an easy road ahead, but at the same time, Tyreek Hill with the injured wrist, Devon Achane had an off game, which was disappointing. How do you feel kind of coming out of Monday Night Football?
I mean, it's wild to try to figure out what's going on with the Rams. First of all, I was in a situation where I needed Cooper Kupp to outscore Puka by just any amount, basically, to win my game. And it didn't happen. But Cooper, he was 7 for 7. He didn't draw, every pass that was thrown his way, he caught it. It's hard for me to figure out why, at least offensively, they're not better. And I guess it boils down to that offensive line. So I don't know what to think about them going forward. It's good just to see that the Dolphins are sort of, they're staying in the conversation, right? I think Achane is going to be fine. And I think Hill's injury is concerning for Tyreek Hill owners, but I think that it means they have to get other pass catchers involved. And so I think it's good news for Jalen Waddle, and maybe even kind of a sneaky go pick up Jonnu Smith if you're just desperate at tight end, and you can use him. He scored me a few points in PPR last night, which was helpful. So I don't really know what to believe about either one of these teams. Last week, I would have said I'm very optimistic about the Rams and super pessimistic about the Dolphins, and it feels like it has switched, which I guess just means I have no idea what's going on or how to use those players going forward.
Yeah, they're big name guys, but it's the trust factor is low, I think, on a number of those guys, at least for me. All right, another couple things shenanigans wise. How about Jared Goff? The guy never throws interceptions. All he's done is throw completions, and then he totally unraveled against Houston. And from a football standpoint, they actually win. The Lions win. But Jared Goff lost me my fantasy matchup because he throws 5 interceptions. Otherwise, it's actually a pretty good day. I mean, that's minus 10 points. He still finished with 11 for me. So that would have been 21 points. I would have been thrilled. But that was wild. I'm not panicking. I'm going to be fine with Goff. And then here's the other big takeaway, the shenanigans of the weekend. The top 12 wide receivers from week 10.
This is such a weird list.
Included these names. MVS, Valdez-Scantling. He's still in the NFL. Did you know that he is still in the NFL and he plays for the Saints? He caught 2 touchdowns. All right, so MVS. Calvin Ridley, as bad as he was early in the year, he is now contributing for the Titans. This guy named Tylan Wallace. May need a sound drop for this guy. Tylan Wallace was...
Seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
Wide receiver for the Ravens. I mean, a huge game for him. Then Cortland Sutton, John Mechie, Alec Pierce, Rashad Bateman, and Ricky Pearsall. Those are your top 12 players. And then, of course, the other guys, too, that you're used to, Jamar Chase and that kind of thing. But those guys are all in the top 12. How crazy is that? What do we take away from that?
I think what I take away from it, early in the season, we were talking about how it just seems like offenses get off to slower starts, at least in these last few years. I think it's because you start inexperienced quarterbacks sooner in their careers. Fewer of these guys play in the preseason. There are all sorts of reasons why we could say that the defenses were stronger than the offenses across the board at the beginning of the season. But you want to believe if there are good coaches in the NFL that they develop their offenses. And so we're seeing the Denver Broncos get a little bit better. And that makes a guy like Cortland Sutton relevant, So some of those names like Mechie is sort of the kind of guy who it's not like a glamorous pick to throw him in your starting lineup, but he's a guy who could be relevant down the stretch. So it has been a weird season, but I think that good coaches can develop their offenses over the course of a season. The opposite of that is the Chicago Bears, right? So they're trending in the wrong direction. Shane Waldron is out now. I'm super frustrated with that situation, especially as a DJ Moore owner in a lot of leagues. But it's just hard to figure out these offenses. They seem like they're trending in one direction on a certain week. And then they drop off. The Tylan Wallace and Rashad Bateman thing killed me because we've been talking about Deontay Johnson. We knew he was on a limited snap count last week, but the Ravens are so good, they don't need to rush him into the offense. It seems like they're going to take their time, and you're going to have to see it for a couple of weeks before you start putting him in your starting lineup again.
All right, so we'll do confession in a little bit. I'll just confess now. I started Deontay Johnson.
Me too.
Again. I doubled down. I doubled down, and I'm going to triple down. Is that a saying? Is that what that means?
It's a saying. I know what you mean.
But you know why I'm doing it?
Why?
He's going up against Pittsburgh, his former team. And Mike Tomlin already made a little comment.
Subtle diss. I saw that.
Subtle diss.
Yeah.
I love Tomlin. I'm good with the diss. It was fine. But I think the Ravens, because this is such a big rivalry, and Deontay, his former team, the Ravens are used to playing against Deontay. I think he's going to get involved. I think they'll make an effort to get him. But I have to confess, Rashad Bateman has been much better than I anticipated.
Right.
I was absolutely wrong about him. He's finally coming around. And you mentioned John Mechie, another guy that we just sort of been waiting. Last year, we were kind of hoping that he would come around. It didn't happen. Of course, overcoming cancer. I mean, what a story for him. But maybe he's finally getting comfortable, getting some opportunity. The shenanigans for me, I thought Nico was back. I thought Nico was going to play. We've been waiting on Nico Collins. It came up to the final moments. Is he in? Is he out? And of course, it was Sunday Night Football, so there's nobody else to add to the starting lineup. I have to, take Nico, put him in IR, and guess who I added? Robert Woods. Robert Woods, and I missed out on John. I missed out on John Mechie. So that was a bummer.
Yeah, I think there are teams in the NFL that are well coached, mature teams, and they don't make foolish decisions. And so rushing Nico Collins back from a hamstring injury is a foolish decision. When the Ravens offense is clicking the way that it is, trying to throw a new player in there too quickly, I think would be a foolish decision. So yeah, it is just like
the Patriots waiting on Drake May.
Right. Yes. Maybe there is something to these sort of developing your team, slow decisions. They don't make exciting talking points on like First Take on ESPN, but it turns out that they might be a better way to build your team. And I just think teams like the Ravens under John Harbaugh, teams like the Steelers under Mike Tomlin, they just always make mature, methodical decisions. And sometimes it makes for boring seasons, but it also helps you develop your team over the course of a season.
That's right. That's right. All right. There's plenty more shenanigans, but we will stop there. And this is an audible. I want to do what's boiling, Bryce, because I've got something to share. And I think you've got something that's, we could do a new segment, Tripping Up Trip.
That's good. Yeah.
I don't know if that sounds
That's
pretty
fitting.
good.
That's fitting
So
because it's been tripping me up all season.
Yeah. So we got something that you need to share. So let me start. Here we go.
And now, what's boiling, Bryce?
All right. So the Atlanta Falcons have been coming on, right? They're playing well, and they look like a much better team than they did last year. Kirk Cousins has made a big difference. But they ended up losing to the Saints with an interim coach, with a wide receiving core that included people that you did not know were in the NFL. Dante Pettis is still in the NFL. MVS is still in the NFL. I picked up some guy thinking that, maybe he'll be the number one guy. I've already forgotten his name because I cut him as soon as the game was over because he scored 0 points. Bo Melton, maybe. Get out of here. But here's what boils me the most from that game. The Atlanta Falcons were on the 1 yard line, and they have a superstar running back. His name is Bijan Robinson, and he's had a great season. He's getting better. And I took him 2nd overall in a fantasy league. I took him another, I think maybe 8th overall in another league. I'm all in. And then it's 1st and goal on the 1 yard line. And what's the call? They all huddle up and they go, okay, here's the call we're going to do. And they look around and they go, oh, it's Tyler Algier. Oh, okay, we'll hand it off to Tyler Algier. Stopped at the 1. Okay, fine. 1st down, no big deal. Well, let's bring Bijan in because he's our star running back. And he's been busting it all day long. All right, 2nd down. Hey, let's just do the same thing. Let's go to Tyler Algier one more time. Okay, fine. We'll try to punch it in. Tyler Algier stopped. 0 for 2. Let's triple down, right? We'll go the 3rd time. Tyler Algier 3 times from the 1. I don't know if it was the 1 or 2 yard line, but he could not get in. And finally, on 4th down, they handed the ball to Bijan Robinson. And what does he do? He marches right into the end zone. He kind of dove in and scored a touchdown. Thank you. Did it really take 3 times to figure out, hey, we should probably give the ball to Bijan? Enough. Listen, I'm thankful that Algier is there to sort of keep him fresh. It's fine, because I think he'll be the best down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs. But when you're on the 1, just give the ball to Bijan. Let's not get cute about this. And this also happens with Washington. Give the ball to Eckler. He already punched it in twice. And then they wanted to get McNichols involved. No, give the ball back to Eckler. All right. That's what's boiling me today. So there you go.
It's such a great point, man, because Tyler Algier is an above average running back in the NFL. But in that progression, you saw the difference between those two players, because if you go back and watch the play, there's a defensive lineman who kind of breaks through and gets a pretty clean shot at Bijan. And he does this thing that looks unimpressive when he does it, that no normal human would be able to do, which is he kind of jumps over the defender who's coming in at his legs and turns that into like a 1-step dive in the end zone. It's not the kind of play that's going to show up on SportsCenter Top 10, but it's just a play that, like, with his contact balance and his athleticism, he's so good. And so you're absolutely right. I think there's this sort of like man football thing that happens in the NFL when you're on the 1 yard line, where it's just like, we're going to assert our will over this team and show you that we can score with Tyler Algier. But it's sometimes it doesn't work. And it's like, why? You would have loved to have those extra seconds at the end of the game, wouldn't you, if you were the Atlanta Falcons, So it's like, I don't know how long that progression was. It was probably 1:30 off the clock when they ran those 3 run plays into the 1 yard line again and again.
I was beside myself in my man cave watching that game alone, yelling at the TV. Just beside myself, not understanding why they'd give the ball to Tyler Algier. But it was like a few weeks ago when Chicago handed the ball off to like a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, some random guy that wasn't even a running back. And they fumbled, and they ended up losing. So, yeah, guys, don't overthink it. Just give the ball to your best player. It's not that hard. Come on. So, all right, what's tripping up Trip this week?
What's tripping up Trip? And we'll keep it with the alliteration because it's a guy named T. T is tripping up Trip, and this is going to transition into our breakout. But T. Higgins has been driving me crazy for 2 seasons now.
Mm.
As somebody who loves Joe Burrow, who thinks that the Bengals should be sort of a perennial Super Bowl contender, T's doing this thing where he's holding out before the season starts. And I'm not saying that this is the reason that he's injured right now, but for the last 2 seasons, he'll come in, he'll have a couple of mediocre games where he's coming back from injury, and then he will have a blow-up game. And you're like, he's back, baby. And you see what this guy is capable of. And you're like, imagine a team that has Joe Burrow as its quarterback and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as its wide receiver 1 and 2. That's one of the most dynamic offenses in the NFL. And then lo and behold, he gets hurt again. Gets hurt at practice, not even in a game. He does something to his quad at practice. And I'm so fed up with T. Higgins. But here's the thing. Next year, I'll buy right back into it. I'll believe in it again. He's probably going to be on another team next season, and I'll buy the hype. T. Higgins, he's a great player. He's an impressive NFL receiver when he's on the field, and it seems like he's just on the field less and less and less, and T is killing me this season, especially in our fantasy football fellowship league that I'm in with some buddies at my church, really relying on T. Higgins, and he has let me down again and again. I think I'm ready next year. I think I may avoid him in the draft. I may not draft him on principle next season.
That makes sense. I've got him in 2 leagues, and it's been unfortunate. So hopefully he's back this week. He's apparently day to day, but I feel like he's always day to day.
He's always day to day. And you
tough.
just think about what could the Bengals be if this guy would stay on the field. And we saw it one season when they went to the Super Bowl.
That's right.
But I think he'll come out and he'll play and he'll get injured again. It's just I'm so pessimistic about him at this point.
I thought maybe Jermaine Burton would have a little breakout game. It didn't quite happen. So
Andre Iosivas is trying to do something.
Nothing.
Mike Gesicki is supposed to be good when T's not on the field, but he didn't do anything this week.
We're not doing accountability and
You're
confession
right.
yet. But what did I do? What did I do?
Calm down.
No, I told everyone, don't buy the Gesicki hype.
I bought it, man.
You bought the hype?
Well, I'm just desperate for tight end in a couple of leagues.
Don't buy the Gesicki. He's such a tease. He
should
is.
Listen to you
Every year. All right. Let's continue this conversation about injuries now that we've gotten rid of what's boiling us this week. I thought you were going to talk about the sunlight in Dallas.
Oh, dude.
CeeDee Lamb. That's what I thought was tripping up this week. So that's also an issue. But here at Fantasy Football Fellowship, we do weekly breakouts. We take a fantasy concept related to the Bible, related to life. And so as fantasy managers, we realize that one of the worst parts of playing fantasy football is dealing with the injuries. But it's what we have to do. It's part of the deal. It's part of the journey of the season is navigating the injuries. The guys who always seem to be questionable, like T. Higgins. You've got guys that, are injured for a section of the season, Cooper Kupp, and hopefully Isaiah Pacheco's finally coming back. We're waiting for Nico Collins to come back. Then you get guys, recently that just got banged up. Sam Laporta and Aaron Jones, and now Dak Prescott out for the year. Trevor Lawrence might be as well. Dalton Kincaid banged up. And so what I really want to focus on today, though, is when you're having the season or the part of the season where it feels like everyone is injured on your team, where it feels like no matter what you do, no matter what player you add, trade for, as soon as they end up on your roster, they're injured. And there's a buddy that in one of my leagues, he's mentioned it throughout this season that during games, his players are getting injured, meaning all the time it seems like in the second quarter, whoever's getting injured early, that guy is on his team. And so maybe that's you. Maybe that's how you relate to the injury bug or the injury plagued season that is affecting really all of us. But some people, it does seem to pile on, where the injuries are piling on. I remember I was probably like week 3 or 4 in one of my leagues. I think my whole starting lineup was questionable, or at least 6 out of the 8 guys were questionable. It's just like, what am I going to do? And so it makes it difficult. And so what injuries for you, Trip, have tripped you up the most?
I mean, I think it has been, these receivers. I came into the season really counting on receivers, and it's these guys who have missed multiple weeks. But actually, the thing that I struggle with more is just the perpetually questionable guy. You mentioned Nico. We thought he was going to play on Sunday night, and then last minute you have to pivot. Man, that makes your fantasy season so hard when you have a guy who you're always waiting until the last minute, and then you got to make a quick replacement. So yeah, this one resonates, man. The injuries thing, it's hard to know what to do about it. And some seasons, I'm never one of those people that is just resigned to bad luck in fantasy. I think there's always something you can try to do to turn your team around. But every once in a while, you'll have one of those years where it's just like, I don't think I can overcome the injury bug this time around.
It's tough. And so what happens is you just start to, say out loud or think, you're just like, my team is so banged up. My team is a mess. I'm injury plagued, and that's what's going on. And so here's the choice that fantasy managers have. Do we give up or continue to endure through the season? Do we finish strong? Do we continue to make moves, or do we just give up and go, it's too hard? My team is too banged up. I can't handle it, and I'm too discouraged, and I'm not going to try anymore. Is that the case? Or will you say, you know what? I'm gonna try to make another move. I'm gonna go try to get the next running back, and maybe it's going to pick up Audric Estime and saying, all right, let's see what we got. Let's go make a run, and maybe you finish strong with him. And more importantly, as we parallel this to our own lives, we all know what it's like to experience injuries in life, challenges, trials, discouragement, things that are devastating. And oftentimes we'll go through a season where it feels like everything is going wrong, where it's just like, I just can't win. It just seems like everything is piling on. No matter what I do, it's not working. And everywhere you turn, it's just like injury. And we have the choice in life too. Do we give up, or do we endure and find encouragement? And this verse really, it encouraged me recently. And it just sort of, I've read Romans a number of times, and especially Romans 5 and Romans 15. And so, but this jumped out to me, and I want to share it today, because as followers of Jesus, we have the ability to persevere through challenges, and we can find encouragement to keep going and endure the injury plagued seasons when we trust him for strength, when we cling to him and the promises of Scripture. We can get through the trials of life, but we have to remember who the source of encouragement and endurance is. And so here's what it says. Romans 15, 4-6. This is in the Amplified Translation. For whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that through endurance and the encouragement of the Scriptures, we might have hope and overflow with confidence in his promises. Now, may the God who gives, this is the key. Now may the God who gives endurance and who supplies encouragement grant that you be of the same mind with one another according to Christ Jesus, so that with one accord you may with one voice glorify and praise and honor the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. And so the God who gives endurance and supplies encouragement, that's who we have to turn to. That's where we have to go for the endurance and the encouragement that we need when the difficulties, the trials, the challenges, the injuries of life, when we feel like, man, I'm so discouraged, I want to give up. What do? We go to Scripture. We go to the promises of God. We are reminded of his character. We rely on and find his strength to give us the endurance to endure, to keep going, to persevere. And so I've been encouraged by the Scripture and just being reminded, all right, it's nice when I get encouragement from other people. Absolutely. But I am encouraged most by God and by his word. And so am I starting there? And when I feel like I can't go on. I can't. It's like one thing after another. What am I going to do? I got to keep my eyes fixed on him. And I got to find I got to ask him to provide the endurance that I need. Trip, jump in there, man.
It's amazing how many verses in the New Testament there are that talk about endurance. And it seems to be one of Paul's favorite metaphors for the Christian life, a race, a marathon, to run the race with endurance, to keep pressing forward. One of my favorite verses is in Hebrews 12, where it talks about throwing off every sin and weight which clings so closely. But then it says, and run with endurance the race set before us. And then what's the very next thing that it says? Looking to Christ Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. And so you're right. There is this immense spiritual power that is promised to us as followers of Jesus when in the midst of discouragement and tiredness and sort of spiritual or literal injury, to look to Jesus and to remember who went before us. I mean, I think that really is a promise in the Bible. So much, probably part of our problem is that we don't recognize that we're tired and discouraged and injured for a long time. We're kind of in denial about that. And then we recognize it and we try to sort of rally and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And what the Bible seems to say over and over again is stop right there and look at Jesus. Remember who he is. Remember his promises. He's not, he's not this vicious taskmaster that sort of drives you along. He wants to walk sort of sustainably and encouragingly beside you as you go. And I love that you drew our attention to this verse in Romans. There's so many great verses that talk about pressing on with Jesus as our shepherd and our friend.
Amen. Absolutely. And again, paralleling this to fantasy, really the key to a successful fantasy season is enduring. It's a long season. Like fantasy football is hard. Like you have to endure the injuries that take place, the tough losses. Like you're going to put up the big fantasy points one week and you're still going to lose. And there are other weeks where you have to, grind out a win and you have to endure and find the right waiver wire guys. And so that's what is part of the deal. But in life, it's the same kind of thing. We know that injuries and suffering and challenges, it's a part of the deal. So we can't deny that they're there or that, I'm not really injured or whatever. No, they're there. We're beat up. We're banged up. We go through especially really tough seasons where, work is hard, home is hard, and friendships are hard, health is bad, all those things. And sometimes it all happens at once. And sometimes you got a injured quarterback, wide receiver, and running back. And then you'll go through a few weeks and you'll get a relief and all that kind of thing. And that's part of the journey too. But when we find ourselves in these seasons, we have the choice. Will we endure or will we give up? And so as followers of Jesus, we do not have to give up. We keep going. We keep enduring. We keep persevering. Hebrews 10:36 says, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. And so there is great reason to endure. There are so many promises. There are blessings for endurance. And then not to mention what's to come. James 1:12 reminds us, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. And then Romans 5:3-5, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And this hope will not lead to disappointment, for we know how dearly God loves us because he has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with his love. And so let's remain hopeful as we develop endurance and experience encouragement to persevere, because we know God loves us and we know he's with us. And I love your point about him being a shepherd and friend. That's what we have available to us as followers of Jesus. So any final words, Tripp?
One final thought. I think what's so wonderful about the Bible is it gives us it gives us sort of this network, this matrix of promises about all of the things that we have to encourage and support us when we feel discouraged and tired and injured. Maybe one of the most underappreciated ones is the gift of rest that God gives us. He invites us to days of Sabbath and seasons of rest. One of the things that frustrates me the most in fantasy football is when a player who is injured tries to play through it, tries to push through it. I kind of think that's what's going on with Michael Pittman right now. He's got a back injury and he just keeps trying to play week after week, and he was out this past week because of it. Sometimes when you recognize I'm discouraged, I'm hurting, I'm injured, the offer from God, the gift from God is to stop and to rest for a little while, whether that's a day or an afternoon, or to take a season where you slow down, So we are called to endure and to push forward. But one of the strategic ways that we ensure lifelong endurance is by incorporating rest into our lives. And I think we live in a time that is so geared towards optimization and productivity that we've come up with this term. I started hearing this in the last few years called self-care. Self-care is this term that we came up with to give us permission to do something that we used to know we just had to do, which is occasionally just slow down, do something that brings you joy, do something that rejuvenates you, and rest. Resting is not weak. It's courageous and it's strong, and it rejuvenates us to follow the Lord with endurance. So that's just one little kind of practical tidbit I would add with this is take some time to rest on the Sabbath day, or being strategic about how you use your vacations to actually rejuvenate you, whatever the case may be. That's an important part of enduring as well.
Absolutely. Because it's easy to say, all right, I'm just going to endure,
Yeah.
and then you crash, right?
You really break down. Yeah, right.
Versus the long-term endurance. And for us, we want our fantasy guys healthy toward the end of the season to endure, and we want our team rocking and rolling and healthy and rested and ready to finish the season strong. So that's a good word for us personally to also endure for the long term. This is a long journey, Lord willing, however long we're here. Let's finish strong and continue to persevere and endure. So I hope that is encouraging for everyone, especially in seasons of really being banged up and seasons of despair and discouragement. Encouragement's available, endurance is available, but it's in Christ. And so let's keep turning to him. There you go. That's this week's breakout. Good stuff from Tripp. You can read the breakout and check out some of the questions and other elements that are included on our website, fantasyfootballfellowship.com, and you can get that for free. All right, so let's do a little accountability and confession. We talk a lot about players on this show, and we get things wrong, and that's part of the deal. We also get some things right, and so we can pat ourselves on the back every once in a while. But I think we've got to start with one of the big performances of the week, and we've had this kind of ongoing. If you listen to the show every week, 1 week I'm right, then Tripp's right, I'm right, he's right. When it comes to Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, I mean, what do we make of this team? It's craziness. So I've been wrong about Kyler Murray in regards to the weeks that he has a great week. So this week he was QB7, or I guess overall he's QB7 on the season. He's averaging nearly 21 points per game. This week he ran a couple in, which was nice, and so he was quick into the end zone. But 22 of 24, big week passing. I will say, so I'll confess, all right, maybe he'll be all right. I do like Trey Benson, though. I am on the Trey Benson bandwagon, and so I drafted him in one league. I hung on to him. He's finally starting to come on. I think he's a guy, if Kyler gets this offense rolling, Connor's fading, Benson's the guy. Benson and Marvin Harrison Jr. might be guys down the stretch that could help win you along with Kyler. So I'm wrong there. What about for you?
Kyler made the comment this week that he feels like he's playing quarterback as well as he has in his whole career, and that he's understanding the offense as well as he has in his whole career. I feel like Kyler's whole career, the Cardinals' game plan has been just try to be in it near the end and then just let Kyler be Kyler. Let him run for 80 yards and sling it around, and he might throw an interception, but he's going to complete a few long passes. Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals don't care if he has a 35-point fantasy game. They just want to win games. And so I would say the Cardinals are a more well-rounded offense, and part of that is that James Conner is having maybe the best season of his career. He's 29 years old. And so you're right. If he goes down, if he gets injured, which he basically misses a few games every season, Trey Benson is one of those handcuff guys on your bench that could win you championships, depending on when Conner gets hurt. I continue to be impressed by Chuba Hubbard. I think it was objectively a dumb thing for the Carolina Panthers to extend him, to give him a 4-year contract.
Oh, Tripp, I totally disagree.
Man. Look,
totally disagree.
When you are in the position that franchise is in, you don't extend middle-aged running backs. So I love Chuba Hubbard, and I understand these are real guys. They're real teams with real sort of emotions, but just purely from an objective GM standpoint, you just drafted Jonathan Brooks in the first round. You don't give a 4-year extension to like a 25-year-old running back. It's just a bad decision. That said, I'm super impressed by Chuba Hubbard, and I don't think that he's not going to go away when Jonathan Brooks comes back. And I actually think at this point, I think he's going to get the majority of the workload there. So I still think he'll get 15-ish touches a game when Brooks comes back, and I just continue to be super impressed by him. I feel like you're upset with my take of not extending him.
I don't like it.
Again, as a real sort of like a sports fan who's thinking about the real emotions in the locker room, like Chuba Hubbard has looked like at points this season that he's the only one on that offense that cares at all. But I'm just talking about, you're trying to build a team, you're trying to turn a franchise around. This is not the move that you make.
right.
I don't think. Tell me why
Let me
I'm wrong.
stop you right there. All right. He's coming off a game where he just carried the ball 28 times, 153 yards, touchdown, 29.9 fantasy points. He's averaging 18.8, currently RB5 in fantasy. Chuba Hubbard. So here's why he's in this segment for confession. I never thought he'd be this good. There's no way. He'd be a top 5 running back through week 10. Are you kidding me? So I don't have him on any teams, but I absolutely love Chuba Hubbard. Even if I wasn't a Panthers fan, I would love Chuba Hubbard because, to your point, he plays hard. In the midst of a brutal team the last few seasons, he's been a lone bright spot. And so as you are building a culture and building a franchise from the ground up, because the Panthers have hit rock bottom, you absolutely want to secure a guy like Chuba Hubbard, who sets the tone in that locker room, who is reliable. And we're starting to learn, like we talked a little bit about this last week. We definitely did on the Unpacking It podcast, the resurgence for running backs and even veteran running backs, old running backs. Derrick Henry leading the way. Even Austin Eckler getting in the end zone a couple times. Should have had 3, but he got 2 touchdowns this past week. So you need multiple running backs. It's fine to have veteran running backs. And yeah, you're paying, I guess the extension gives them like $8 million a year, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it. Now you got some young wide receivers that will make less money too with Leggett and Jalen Coker. So I love it.
All right.
There you go. So we can agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree.
That's
yeah. The optimistic point there is that more and more of these teams are going to like a running back duo, and you could see Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks being a really nice sort of tandem running back pair. So I can get excited about that for future seasons.
At the worst, it's Mostert and
Achane,
right. Devon Achane. Or you got David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. So it can work with the young guy, the veteran guy. It's a nice 1-2 punch. All right, a couple other things. Speaking of the Panthers, Deontay Johnson with the Ravens. Oh boy. So yeah, I've definitely confessed that. I got to confess that Travis Kelce is having a much better year than I anticipated. And part of that, I think, is some of the injuries and just how their offense has sort of changed a little bit. But 8 for 64 and a touchdown this past week. But he's becoming one of the top tight ends again. I sort of wrote him off. And, I guess I probably thought Marquise Brown was going to do more this year. And then, of course, Pacheco being injured. So there's just some things that have sort of changed the circumstances. But he's been solid the last few weeks. So I got to give him some credit. The tight end that I was in on, Dalton Kincaid, has been a total letdown. I thought he was going to take the next step forward and become more of the Travis Kelce, but instead it was the opposite. He's taking a step back. And other receivers for the Bills, mainly Shakir, have really shined. So he's had a great season. Thankfully I have him in one league, but I went all in on Kincaid and he's been a letdown. So
yeah, I believe in Kincaid, and I think it's the Shakir effect. That's exactly right. It's hard for me to figure out why Kincaid has not been more involved. At this point, I think you can just kind of safely say we know what he's going to be. It's going to be like a low end tight end 1 on a good week, and I needed him to be much more than that this season.
Absolutely. All right, let's have a little fun with some peace or panic. And this is when we talk about players that maybe had an off week or maybe a couple weeks in a row. And we have to start with someone who has been tremendous this season, but he's coming off a tough game. But we have to remember it was against the Steelers. But Jaden Daniels, 17 of 34, 202 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 7 fantasy points. I somehow still won. I won my matchup despite that. But are you panicking about this poor performance?
Not at all. I think the Steelers are one of the best defenses in the NFL. My main takeaway from this game is that the Steelers might be sort of a dark horse to make a deep run in the playoffs. So they have an excellent defense, and this is the first game where Jaden kind of looked like a rookie since like the first game of the season. So no, I'm not panicking at all. And if you've got a need at quarterback and could go trade for him, I don't think that you can. But no, happy to stay on the Jaden Daniels bandwagon. I
still am always nervous about rookie quarterbacks and even rookie wide receivers in the fantasy playoffs. I'm not even sure I have data to back that up. It's more of just a feeling like, can these guys that have, especially if they were great early, can they really keep it going all the way till the end of the season to win a fantasy championship? It's tough. Now, when it comes to rookie running backs that like come on halfway through the year, I'm good with that because then they can finish strong and they emerge at the end of the year. But with quarterbacks, I don't know.
He had 5 rushing yards this game. And I think that's because the Steelers are one of the few defenses in the NFL that can sort of put a spy on him and keep him under control, can keep him contained. So I think he's always going to have that rushing floor to sort of buoy him from just a terrible week like this. I just think he ran up against maybe the only defense that can stop him from doing what he wants to do with his legs. So I feel good about Jaden Daniels going forward.
All right, peace or panic, and we'll go deep on this because I think two teams need to be discussed here: the New York Jets and the Dallas Cowboys. The panic meter has to be high from an NFL standpoint. I think the Jets have a couple easy matchups coming up, so they might tease us for a couple weeks. But Dallas has a couple too. But I mean, with Dak being out, it's tough. So Garrett Wilson this past week, 11 fantasy points. Devontae Adams, 9 fantasy points. You know, Breece Hall was okay, but not the elite first round talent that we expect when we drafted him that early this year. And then CeeDee Lamb, 9.9 fantasy points, 6 catches for 21 yards. Yikes. So do you have peace about any players on the Jets or the Cowboys, or are you panicking across the board? I think that's the way to frame this.
Panicking for both teams. We know what the problem is with the Jets. It's one person, and it's not that he's terrible. It's just that he is middling. And so I think all these receivers will continue to be middling. It seems clear to me that Garrett Wilson is better than Devontae Adams at this point in his career. And I kind of wonder if they just get to a place where they start force feeding Garrett Wilson again, because he's kind of their only hope on offense, especially when they're losing games. But they just played the Arizona Cardinals. That is not that good of a defense. And Rodgers looked terrible. So I think they got kind of the 1 week. Everybody was counting them out. The whole news cycle was about how bad they are. And they got sort of the 1 week, we're angry about that boost. But I think we know what the Jets are, and it is not a good football team. The Cowboys are also awful. I didn't know what rant you were teeing me up for earlier, but I was watching this Cowboys game, and I'm sitting there thinking, I've been to Cowboys Stadium.
Ooh.
I've stood on that field. I got to go the year after it was built. I happened to be in Texas for a wedding, and I got to go take a tour of the new stadium, and it is so beautiful, state of the art, incredible. It must be an amazing place to watch a football game. I stood down on the field. When I'm watching this game on TV, I cannot understand why the light at that time of day is shining directly through the dead center of the field into every player's face that's facing in one direction. And if you saw the touchdown, the almost touchdown pass to CeeDee Lamb, he was looking directly into the light, and he said afterwards, I couldn't see the ball. He would have caught that touchdown. It was an easy catch. He just had to slow his crossing speed a little bit, and he would have caught it. So I think if he had, then we're talking about a 15-point game. CeeDee Lamb is still going to be a good wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season, but that's not what you drafted him to be. Dak is done now. Cooper Rush, I think you know what you have in Cooper Rush, and once the Cowboys realize that their season is over, they may already realize it, or they may be in denial. Never underestimate Jerry Jones' ability to be in denial about something. I think that they're going to give Trey Lance a long look, and that's probably bad news for CeeDee Lamb compared to Cooper Rush. So he's going to continue to be this guy who gets you low double-digit fantasy points, and is probably a wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season. But I got one team that I have CD, and I needed him to be the stud wide receiver 1 that scores 20 points for me a week, and he is not going to be that. So a certain level of panic there, to be sure.
Yeah, I've got panic for both teams. I've got Garrett Wilson, and so there's definitely a level of panic. But the piece is that I think he could still be a wide receiver 2, a flex, and thankfully in that league, I've got Devontae Smith and DK Metcalf. So I'm going to be okay, but it's definitely concerning, no doubt about it. But here's a guy we got to keep an eye out for: Braylon Allen. I'm still thinking that maybe if the Jets do at some point shut things down with Rodgers and the season unravels, Braylon Allen could be the guy that benefits down the stretch as a running back. So he's a guy to at least keep on your bench and stash a little bit. So
can I ask you a would you rather?
Some of the talent. Yeah.
Would you rather have Garrett Wilson or CeeDee Lamb for the rest of the season? You still think CeeDee?
I mean, the Cowboys season is truly over already. They've got no shot.
Aaron Rodgers is definitely better than Cooper Rush or Trey Lance. So
yeah, I'd probably go Garrett Wilson.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. That'll be intriguing to watch how that plays out with both of those guys. But I think I'm still cautiously optimistic about Garrett Wilson. As long as the Cowboys can get some curtains over those windows, I think CeeDee Lamb has better days ahead of him. But
it's just an absurd. It's an absurd.
I was
thing.
So angry about that when I was watching, man. It's just I got unreasonably mad about the lighting conditions in Cowboy Stadium.
It's what's tripping up Trip today.
It was tripping me up, man.
That's it. I like it. All right, let's get a little more positive and do some bandwagon riding. Some guys who are playing well. We're gonna hop on.
Get off the bandwagon.
It's time for bandwagon riding. Getting on, getting off.
All right, so there was a time where I was hesitant about the San Francisco 49ers, and I think it's tough when teams lose in the Super Bowl to bounce back, and the idea that they got off to a slow start, CMC was injured, wasn't too surprising for me. But I have to say, at this point in the season, I'm jumping on their bandwagon because I think they've got the talent. I know they have the talent. I think that they can get things rolling. And you know what really encourages me is George Kittle. I mean, he's playing awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Even in CMC's first game back, he was awesome. So a lot of reasons to jump on the Bengals bandwagon. But what's interesting for us today, are we jumping on the Ricky Pearsall bandwagon or Juan Hennings?
Juan
Hennings. Whatever way. Are you jumping on their bandwagon? So Pearsall, 19.8 points, 4 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown. Rookie, they've invested in him. Are you jumping on this bandwagon?
Jennings is a guy that you can start, but Pearsall is the guy to be excited about. I was watching this game, and he had a great stat line. He caught the touchdown pass, but if you just watched him, he looked like an athletic, like a real NFL wide receiver. And so I think especially, with the loss of, why can I not remember his name? Brandon Ayuk. With the loss of Brandon Ayuk, I think Pearsall really has the potential to flourish here in the second half of the season. So yeah, definitely jumping on that bandwagon.
All right. The Denver Broncos backfield has been one that is so confusing. 3 different running backs. They've all been hyped at different times going back to the summer through 10 weeks. It's like, oh, it's going to be Jaleel McLaughlin. No. Javonte Williams. He's been here. He's going to be great. No, guys, you got to listen. There's this guy named Audric Estime. Look out for Estime. He's coming. And now Estime is here. He had a nice game. And now the hype is rising. 14 carries for 53 yards. Javonte Williams had a bad game. Denver is one of these teams that continues to be in the mix. They'll finish around 500 most likely. That's the kind of team they are, which is fine. It's a step forward for them. It is funny that Russell Wilson's playing well in Pittsburgh, but Bo Nix is doing a nice job in Denver. So are you jumping on the Audric Estime bandwagon, and are you jumping off the Javonte Williams bandwagon?
Definitely off the Javonte bandwagon. Remember who the Broncos played. They played the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are a great defense. They shut down the run, generally speaking. So I actually think this might be your last chance to acquire Audric Estime, whether that's on waivers or like a kind of a low ball trade offer, because the stat line isn't that impressive, but it was against the Chiefs. I think Sean Payton loves to have sort of an alpha running back. He loves to have a running back that he can just rely on and give 15 to 20 touches a game. And I think down the stretch, that is probably what Estime is going to be. I bet you that he will get like 14-ish carries like he did this week, but that might translate more to like 75 yards and a touchdown every once in a while. So yeah, I think he's going to be the kind of guy that you can play week over week as kind of your RB2 or a flex or something like that. I'm optimistic about Estime, and I want to get on that bandwagon if I can.
I'm avoiding I'm just not in on the Broncos backfield this year. So
to see what their schedule
But Estime, yeah, it's worth it. If he's available at most, he's probably taken in most leagues, but if he is available, definitely worth picking up. Because people have said maybe he's a league winner. And so, I never did this during confession. I never confessed that Kamani Vidal.
I think Estime might be what you wanted Vidal to be, and I don't think your Vidal take was wrong. And I still think there's a good chance that this week, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards both get hurt. And then Vidal is super relevant. That was always Jim Harbaugh is the kind of guy who's going to play his veterans until he can't play his veterans anymore. So I don't think Vidal is totally lost for the season, but it's going to take an injury. Whereas I think that Estime has just supplanted Javonte Williams. And looking at their schedule, they have a pretty nice schedule for running backs for the rest of the season, with the exception of playing the Chargers in Week 16, which is kind of a tough matchup. So I kind of think Estime could be the kind of guy that that fills
the
in
league
for
winner.
you. Yeah.
The league winner.
I don't know if he'll be a league winner in like the sense of he just blows up and is the RB10 for the rest of the season, but I could see him being something, like the RB18 for the rest of the season or something like that, and that is useful.
I think Trey Benson could fall into that.
Yeah, I think so too.
That
Yeah.
league.
Again, we've said it week after week. These are the kind of guys you want to have on your bench and just see what happens. And as soon as you're going to look like a genius if the guy in front of them gets hurt. If it doesn't happen, then everybody's going to be like, you're wasting a bench spot on Trey Benson or whatever. But those are the chances you got to take if you want to win a championship.
And I know everybody's given up on Blake Corum. He continues to be irrelevant. But let's remember, he was one of the top. I think he was the second running back taken right after Jonathan Brooks. He was taken pretty early by the Rams. And so if the Rams at the end of the season, if they're out of playoff, I mean, right now they're still in playoff contention, but I think Corum's still a guy that on certain teams you should definitely stash. A couple other names to jump on the bandwagon for, especially as we're talking waiver wire. I bet a lot of people drop Keaton Mitchell this week because he didn't do much. But if you've been listening, John Harbaugh with the Ravens has said he'd like to get Keaton Mitchell, running back for the Ravens, involved. They have to give Derrick Henry some breather. And Justice Hill's fine, but Keaton Mitchell last year at the end of the year, he was unbelievable. Every time he touched the ball, he was going like 40 yards. So I would keep an eye on Keaton Mitchell for sure. I also like Cam Akers in Minnesota. Aaron Jones is banged up, so I'm on the bandwagon for Cam Akers. And then also Tyjae Spears in Tennessee. I know the Titans stink and they're not going to score many touchdowns, but they're trying to phase Tony Pollard out a little bit because he was getting so many carries. Spears was injured. Now he's healthy. He's only in the second year. They want to see more out of him. So he's a guy to keep an eye on for as well and jump on that bandwagon. Anybody else for you bandwagon riding?
No, those are all great. Tyjae Spears makes me nervous for Pollard. So it's more getting off the Pollard bandwagon. Yes. And the one other thing I would add is that Pacheco, he's they've opened his window to return. I think that Kareem Hunt has been so good that it's just going to be a true timeshare there. So if you're somebody who has held on to Pacheco and there's somebody in your league who thinks that he's going to come back and immediately be like the full on running back one in Kansas City, I think I might try to trade him. His injury was similar to what Pollard had 2 seasons ago. And you remember it took him about half a season to return to form. So I think they're going to ease Pacheco in and they're thinking about playoffs with him. And so, yeah, Isaiah Pacheco is a guy that I want to get off that bandwagon if I can. And I think Kareem Hunt will continue to be useful even when Pacheco comes back. So
I think that's a good take. I think that I've got him and I would like to trade him because I'm in second place without him. So I don't necessarily need him. So that would be an interesting trade. Okay. All right. I like it. Cool. Well, there you go. There's some bandwagon riding. We will wrap up the show asking the question, who is that as we look across the league? Some guys that surprised us, scored out of nowhere. Again, MVS in New Orleans. Are you kidding me? That's the one for the week. I just could not believe it. 2 touchdowns for him. And the Saints won. That was nuts. But here's a couple other names. So going back to Thursday night, I told you guys, forget Mike Gesicki. Forget about him. And the Bengals forgot about him too. You know who they threw the ball to all night long? Of course, Jamar Chase, but also Tanner Hudson.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
He's the star of a new Hallmark Christmas movie, Tanner Hudson, starring Tanner Hudson. 6 of 7, 42 yards and a touchdown. So don't rush and pick him up, but enjoy his work in the upcoming Christmas movie. Tanner Hudson, there he is. All right, how about in Denver, a guy named Devon Vele, 4 catches.
Seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
39 yards and a touchdown, 15.9 fantasy points. Let's give it up for Tripp. He told us about him right before the season.
I mentioned him in our sleeper episode, and Devon Vele is an older guy. He was like a 5th-year senior in college. Sean Payton really likes him. He is going to be the kind of player for the rest of his career that we mention in this segment about twice a year. So he's just going to be the kind of guy that catches 4 touchdowns a season and has a game every once in a while where he goes over 50 yards. But you could do worse than like sort of an end of your bench kind of, hey, Nico Collins isn't actually starting on Sunday night. Who can I throw in there? I'll throw in Devon Vele. Why not? You know, he might do something like this for you, but they liked him before the season, but he's not going to be like sort of an elite wide receiver in the NFL, I don't think.
I just haven't known what to do with the Broncos this year. Like I just haven't been able to buy into the Broncos. I've got Cortland Sutton and he's been pretty solid for the most part, but then he had a goose egg one week. So they're an interesting team to me, but they're in the mix. But yeah, Vele's fine. All right, what about the Eagles? What a crazy game for them. They blow out the Cowboys, and then all of a sudden they got all these different players in there. Well, Johnny Wilson got into the end zone.
Who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
1 catch, 5 yards for Johnny Wilson. I think he's a receiver. I mean, he's got to be 5th, 6th receiver on that team, right? Way down there.
They got so many guys that they could throw to in Philadelphia, but
they got so many weapons. I talked about this on the Unpacking It podcast today. The Eagles are absolutely a title contender at this point. Like they're clicking, they're coming together. They got tons of talent. Johnny Wilson, probably not the one that's going to put them over the top. All right, how about in New England? Your boy Drake May continues to get it done. This time throwing it to Jalen Polk.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
All right, 1 catch, 1 touchdown, 2 yards. I think we know Polk a little bit.
they were excited about him.
Yeah.
He hasn't done anything.
No,
so
that's sorry.
maybe this will wake him up a little bit. Who
Congrats
knows?
on the touchdown. And then, of course, I was all excited this season about Kamani Vidal and getting him into the end zone. And, he scored his first touch. And then ever since then, the Chargers decided not to use him. However, this week, they decided to make him inactive, and they kept Hassan Haskins out there.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
Yeah, scored a touchdown. Hassan Haskins.
I can tell you your earlier rant. If Jim Harbaugh was the coach of the Atlanta Falcons, he would have run Tyler Algier up the middle 3 times and then he would have gone for it again. You're right. Yeah. He would have done it the 4th time. Yeah. He's the kind of guy that's just like, man, football. If Hassan was working hard at practice this week, then we're going to get him in there and we're going to get a touchdown for him. And he's such a fun coach, but he can mess up your fantasy week.
Yeah. Hassan Haskins. Really? That's who they gave the ball to at the goal line. So there you go. Who is that? He's Trip. Aaron is our producer. I'm Bryce. Thank you so much for listening today. It was another fun show. Be sure to check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. I'm a sports fan who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans and fantasy managers who follow Jesus together. Let's endure, let's find encouragement from the Lord, and let's persevere even during an injury-plagued season. Have a great one. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast.